Minnesota native. My family and I moved up here to Sartell in 2020. My wife Sarah and our 3 sons, Roland, Henry, David. Roland is 7, Henry is 5, David is 6 months. We moved up here for probably the most reason, or for the reason most families do, which is that the schools are excellent, have a good reputation. Nothing ever happens in Sartell, which I love personally. I don't know, maybe you wish it was more exciting, but I love it up here. It's quiet, it's peaceful. And we have the intention of sending our children to the schools, but they attend, our 2 school-going children attend the St. Cloud Christian School. And that's because we just started to disagree with some of the decisions that the board had made. And some of the emphases that were kind of propping up in public education were just not in agreement with some of our values. That's not to say that I have the expectation that public school should be Christian in orientation. That's the nature of public institutions. But we just kind of sent them elsewhere. And I'm running because I really think that some of the decisions that the board has recently made since 2020 have kind of put us on the wrong track. I think the equity audit and the decision to continue masking were frankly not good decisions. I think the board hemorrhaged a lot of trust with the public as a result of that. And I'm running in the hope that I could restore some of that trust. Another reason I'm running is that our children and youth are important. And in a broader sense, I don't want to tease this analogy out too much, my children are your children, just as your children are mine. Because I hate to break it to you, but this room has a 100% mortality rate. That's a little morbid, but it's true. None of us are making it out of here alive. So the future is, I mean, not to use a trope, but the future is our children. So we should have an investment and we should care about the things that all of our children are learning, are exposed to, are influenced by, are care about. And furthermore, we should also care about the public institutions that those children are in. Our public institutions are important. We want them to be robust and healthy because those institutions represent our values. They represent our values on a municipal level, our local values. On a state level, they represent a much larger kind of political body. And at a national level, they represent our national values as well. So I care about our public institutions. I want to see them thrive. And I think the key to that is restoring a degree of trust with the public that the board has recently lost.
Move on to Chelsea.
Yes. Hello, my name is Chelsea Thielen, and I have been in Sartell since 2016, but have been a lifelong resident of Central Minnesota. So I grew up in Rice and went to Sac Rapids Rice High School. Also then graduated from St. Cloud State with a bachelor's degree in business management. And our children started off by going to All Saints Academy in St. Cloud, and as they were ready to graduate out of that, we kind of gave them the option of where they might want to continue their education, and they were ready for public school, a bit more like bigger class sizes, more opportunities. Our girls were really thriving academically, and so we moved to Sartell for that reason, for the school district, and have been really happy with the school system. Our daughters, who are now 18 and 16, so one that just graduated high school last year and one that is a junior this year, they have absolutely flourished in our school system. And so part of me running, in addition to always being interested in government and civil responsibility in high school, I was at Girls State, which I think HBO has a documentary on, but I wouldn't trust that for what it's what Girls State is about. I was also a page at the state capitol. So I've always been excited and interested in government and in serving the community. And then I was really inspired by my daughters, who have both been on the exec board of student council, and was really just like, I think when I was in high school, I'm pretty sure the student council just planned maybe a couple small parties. But just absolutely blown away by the work that our high school student council does for the district, from arranging events to doing concessions at sporting events, from organizing teacher appreciation. So they inspired me, and I've always told them that if you want to see change in this world, you have to be willing to be a part of it. And so that is why I am running. And I am running because I'm seeing a community that's becoming more more divided. And I think that the way that we can continue to uphold our schools and support our students and our staff is to come together and to have stronger schools together as a community, as educators, as students. And so I am running because of the amazing experience my girls have had at the school district, the incredible teachers and staff from the front office to the janitors to the food service individuals. They know the staff by name and the staff know them, and our teachers have really helped my girls thrive. And so now I feel like it's my opportunity to support our students and our educators and continue to move our district forward towards excellence.
Okay, I'm Trisha Mealy. I am currently already on the board. I'm serving my first term. I am currently your board chair. I did graduate from St. Ben's in 2006 with a degree in communication. And then I also have been married for, well, almost 17 years to my husband, Sean. We also have 5 children in the district currently. I have a junior, a freshman, a 6th grader, a 3rd grader, and a 1st grader. And they absolutely love our schools. Part of the reason I ran 4 years ago is that my husband has lived his life in service. He is celebrating 24 years in the National Guard, and watching him serve our country inspired me to serve our community. I also serve our community as a substitute teacher, which I have so much joy getting to see our students and getting to see our buildings so firsthand. It really helps me as a board member understand our problems and or our amazing successes at a completely different level that I had not experienced prior. I've also served as our treasurer and our vice chair, and I've served on many, many board committees. I think my favorite has probably been the Sartell Senior Connection, mostly because I got to serve on that for 3 years, and I really got to foster some great relationships with the people on that group. Why am I running now? Well, I feel like I still have a lot of work to do. I hear a lot of people say that trust has been broken. Trust was broken, from my perspective, before I was even elected. There was a lot of question about the equity audit, and I will admit that I think that there was a lot of flaws with that equity audit, and I think that we need to keep working as a community to come together and figure out what we need to do next, because there are still student voices that brought that upon us, and as much as the audit itself did not do the work that was needed to be done, we as a community need to continue to do that work. We need to make sure that all of those students that came forward and spoke about how they did not feel safe, they did not feel welcome in our buildings, we need to do a better job and make sure that we're continuing to move forward in that mission. I also would like to see Riverview see some HVAC updates in this 50-year-old building, and I think that it is well overdue to see that building brought into the new age of HVAC.
30 seconds.
So that is why I am running, and thank you.
Hello, I'm Aaron Alexander. I was born and raised in Sartell. I graduated in 2005. After that, I joined the U.S. Army for 8-year stint. After that, now I work in corrections here in the city of St. Cloud. So I trade one service for the next for our community. One big thing for me for running is that I have 2 small children in the district, one 10 and one 7, and I want to see them get the kind of education I got when I went to Sartell. It was a very proud school, and the education I got. Also, I just want to help the kids. That's my big goal, is to do things for the kids and make sure they get what they need to thrive in this district. Sorry. With being from Sartell and seeing some of the things that have happened in the last 4 years, 8 years, even with COVID and everything else, and some of the paths that were taken that some people thought was right, some not. It is what it is. I think in order to move on from all this, we have to stop looking in the past as much and look to our future more, just for the kids' sake and not just politically what is going on in the world.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thanks a lot for being here. I know everybody's right. And I appreciate the interest that everybody has in our district. I'm with Tricia. I'm the other incumbent here. I've done the board now for almost 4 years. Tricia and I were both elected in 2020, took office January 2021. So I was the board chair prior to Tricia serving. I served that the year prior to this one. I've also served as treasurer. And kind of unique for me is that I serve on, right now, 3 other boards that are related to the school board, but are with outside. I took over Tricia's job representing the school district on the Sartell Senior Connection Board, which is, like she said, just a blast to be on. It's a great place to be and great people that work there. I'm also on the Benton Stearns Education District Board, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, Benton Stearns handles a lot of our higher needs special ed programming, basically birthed at age 22. So we cooperate with 5 other area districts. They are Ricori, Holdingford, Foley, Sauk Rapids, Rice, and Kimball. And we all share in the facilities and things. And one board member from each of those school boards sits on the Benton Stearns board, so I'm currently rep on that. And then I also I've only had 2 meetings now so far, but I'm newly rep for the Minnesota State High School League Region 8AA Advisory Committee. So they get together and their main job is to run the section tournaments in our area, northwestern Minnesota, and also advise the Minnesota State High School League Board down in cities when they have any sort of policy or rule changes that they're looking. That's been really interesting, but I'm pretty new to that, and I hope to continue that as well. A little bit about me. I've been in Sartell 17 years. I am not a central Minnesota native myself. That part goes to my wife, who grew up in St. Joe and went to Apollo High School, graduated there. So we met in law school. I have a law degree from the U of M. Fresh out of law school in 2005, moved up here, got a job at a law firm called Rukuski Hansmeyer in St. Cloud, which until just a few months ago was still called Rukuski Hansmeyer. Now it's called RGP Law. I continue to work with them, but for the past few years I've been part-time, which is part of the reason I have time for this job. As much as I enjoy this work, it is also quite busy, so I don't know that I'd be able to do it if I was a full-time attorney. But like I said, I met my wife a long time ago. We've lived in Sartell 17 years.
30 seconds.
Thank you. My service work for the schools didn't start on the school board. It started in the Pine Meadow building itself. When my kids hit kindergarten, by the way, I've got 2 girls, they're middle school and high school age now. When they hit kindergarten, I started becoming a classroom volunteer on a regular basis and really enjoyed that work and wanted to continue that service of the school district, which is why I ran for school board. So the reason I'm running, I think I bring a quality approach to the table. I've got the skills from my job as a lawyer that benefits the school district, and I'd be honored to serve again for another 4 years.
Hello, my name is Michael Ringstead, and I'd like to start off by thanking everyone here. I'd like to thank Rocks and Culls for doing the forum. Throwing my name in the hat for the school board wasn't something I imagined I was going to do. I'm running on the school board because I could only sit on the sidelines for so long as I witnessed and personally affected by the unintended consequences of poor decisions that fractured community trust, contributed to enrollment decline, and affected academic achievement. I'm running for the school board because if I want to change the public school system, I've got to be engaged and commit time to learning what is going on at the school board level, why there seems to be some dysfunction, and how board members could work to collaborate with each other in order to restore public trust. I believe all kids deserve the access to highest quality education possible, Our kids perform better when parents are engaged with their school and partner with the teachers to create the best possible outcome for each student. Another important role of the school board is to ensure that the district is focused on responsible spending. Nearly half of people's property taxes fund their local school districts, and I believe we need to be responsible with that hard-earned dollars of our community members. I've served on many boards and have acquired strong listening skills, effective problem-solving abilities, and understand the importance of collaboration among board members in order to achieve the best possible outcomes. Finally, I believe in the importance of adhering to policy and procedure to maintain the mission and integrity of an organization. As a member of the school board, I will listen to members of the community, collaborate with other board members, and make informed decisions that will positively affect all stakeholders. The members of our community, teachers, staff, future employers, parents, and students. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the school district and an opportunity to earn your support. Thank you.
So Michael, starting with you down there. What is your stance on sexually graphic books at our schools, even the high school? The current vetting process deems sexually graphic books acceptable if any two online sources call the book young adults. You're a young adult. Is that an acceptable process?
Could you say sorry,
I get it. What is your stance on sexually graphic books at our schools, even the high school? The current vetting process deems sexually graphic books acceptable if any two online sources call the book young adult. Is that an acceptable process? So it sounds like a two-part question.
Yeah. I guess when I look, I don't agree with it. I've never heard the version of the online two-person deal about having it being available for the kids. I looked on the district policy 606, it says that it should ensure that the content found within the eligible district building supports the goals and objectives of the educational programs, which in my mind, if you follow that rule, I don't know where this other issue that's getting brought up with the books, but I do not agree that they should be available in the public school system.
I just figured we can move the microphone back this way.
So I would say that I do not agree that books that are age inappropriate should be in our schools. And what's age inappropriate is different at each building, of course. We did have an issue that came up about 2 years ago where some books had gotten purchased for the high school and were able to check out to students, and some of them failed to go through the vetting process that they should have, frankly. I'm allergic to these microphones or what, but it seems to work for it. Sorry if it's a little loud, but yeah, so anyway, we did complete that vetting process this summer on 1,300 or so books, specifically looking at them for age appropriateness, which I know there's new state laws about what you can and can't do in getting rid of books. Age appropriateness is one of the things you're allowed to consider, and that's something we should do. And I think even the state legislature, of course, understands that because they put that in law. So we, out of 1,300 books, I think there were maybe 15 that we deemed age inappropriate that had come in during that time. So they are appropriately not in our library and not available to students. Another thing we did in response, and this is now a year and a half ago, another thing we did in response to that issue was to put a system in place where parents who want to have a say in what their kids are exposed to have that chance now. You can sign up for a program as a parent in any of our school buildings where if a student wants to check out a book, the parent has to get prior approval. This is not, it's not the default, but it's an opt-in system where if any parent wants to have a say in what their children are exposed to, they have that right. And that's important for parents to have that right. So I think we've landed in a good spot. I think we had issues that needed addressing. We addressed them, and moving forward, we know now how best to balance everybody's opinions on this matter. Thank you.
My stance on it would be, I also agree that they need to be age appropriate per building, but as you said, with the vetting process being online, I think that should be looked into a little bit closer, just because depending on the sources, who's going to vet it and where it's getting vetted from, I would think you'd have to find some appropriate places that the book's actually appropriate for the children and makes sense to have in the school. Some books that I've looked at and seen that, some of the language for age appropriateness, even for a high school kid, I think for a freshman or sophomore, is not deemed appropriate. I know kids hear things all the time, but with what Matt said and there being a new direction of having the parents get an opt-in option, I haven't heard that, so that's good to hear at least. But I think a lot of books should be looked at that age appropriate level and taken out of certain schools that they don't need to be in.
Okay, so I very much agree with what Matt already has said, but I want to add a couple things. So not only can you opt in to be notified what your children are reading, you also can be notified by Skyward what your child is checking out. So it's not even something that you have to necessarily opt into. I believe the system would be that you actually would be notified, so that it's also great so that if you don't know what library book you're missing, you can go look in Skyward and say, oh, okay, yeah, we borrowed this book and now I know exactly what I need to go look for. The other thing that I think I would want to add is that if you still don't agree with that book, or you still don't think that the process has done its job, we as parents and we as community members still have the option to challenge those books. So the vetting process that didn't happen has now happened, and 15 books were removed. But if you still don't feel that that book that's in our building is appropriate, you still can challenge those books, and then that becomes another process that we would go through. So I think that kind of helps take care of that.
So I will also agree that I think it's appropriate to ensure that there are age-appropriate books at each of the school levels. Being that I'm not aware of there having been any reports of sexually graphic materials at any of the lower level schools, I'm going to assume that this question is probably heavily geared towards the high school, which there is where there were books reported. I think that the community seems to also have a bit of a different description of what sexually graphic means, and that there can be different levels that each parent is comfortable with. I do think that using the guidelines that are out there for rating books that bookstores and libraries and other schools are using to determine the appropriateness of the books does seem sufficient. It might not be what each parent agrees with, and that's why I think it is important to have parent visibility into the books that their children are checking out and to allow them to opt out of things. I don't believe that it should be another parent's right to tell my kids what they can read, or that I should be able to tell another parent what their child can read. I think all kids are created differently, and we need to make sure that we are also respecting their amendment rights to have access to information. And so we can do that in a way that is granting them access while still not putting things irresponsibly in front of them. So I guess to make sure that I'm answering the question, I agree that it is important to make sure we have age-appropriate literature in our schools. I think that our community might have different definitions of what sexually explicit means, and that each parent has the right to say what that means to them and what they're comfortable with their student reads, as well as our young adults in high school, some who reach the age of 18, have that right to read what they want and have those amendment rights. And I do believe that using the kind of grading systems that are out there for books should be a good indicator of that level.
So I'm gonna buck maybe, oh, it's ringing, sorry. I'm gonna buck maybe some of your expectations and just, maybe if you mute it while we're talking, it'll cut down. Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna, generally speaking, I actually don't favor the emphasis of prohibiting literature writ large in an academic setting. And the reason why is it kind of cuts against the grain of what academics is about, which is mainly kind of a broad exposure to different ideas. And especially for youth, if you prohibit access early, well, what's going to happen when they go out into the world and encounter that stuff anyway? Well, okay, so what did that accomplish ultimately? But I do think, well, number one, also, book banning is illegal in Minnesota as of August 1st, 2024. But I do want to point out, in that statute that was signed into law by Governor Walz, this is just, I'm going to read it here from Minnesota State Statute 134, because I think this captures what parents were attempting to summon to the board, okay? Nothing in this section limits a public library's authority to decline to purchase, lend, or shelve, or remove or restrict access to books or other materials based upon legitimate pedagogical concerns, including but not limited to the appropriateness of potentially sensitive topics for the library's intended audience, the selection of books and materials for a curated collection, or the likelihood of causing a material and substantial disruption of the work and discipline of the school. So I think that's ultimately what some of those parents and community members were trying to say, is that, hey, I don't think, according to this provision, which the state legislature crafted for boards and library administrators, they said, well, wait a second, I think you really need to craft out or carve out a provision for them to evaluate those things. And I think that's what they were doing. But to answer the question more broadly, based on some of the excerpts I saw of that literature, I think there were very strong arguments to be made against their appropriateness for that intended audience, and I think parents who raised those concerns were probably right that they should be available. But that provision in the law exists for a reason, and I think the board needs to exercise that when the community does raise challenges to some forms of literature.
Should I just use this one?
Yeah. I think as long as you're muted when we're talking, you should.
This thing before, so I don't know how to mute it. Keep it simple. Recognizing that as an elected school board member, you represent all constituents of the school district, how are you going to ensure that all voices are heard and given equal weight?
Well, I mean, the simple answer to that is listening. Obviously, I'm going to be more dependent upon my colleagues and community members to inform me about what's going on in the schools because my children aren't in it. I also think, though, that gives me a bit of leverage to be potentially more impartial when it comes to making difficult decisions for the board, which I think are looming if we don't reverse some of the enrollment trends. I've already met with Mike Rivard, the superintendent. I think seems like a great guy. I think we can have a great working relationship. And I think as the contracts dispute kind of demonstrated, the board really needs to work through their superintendent to listen to the concerns that are raised through him by the staff that he oversees. So I think that's part of it too. I think really what this question is getting at, though, is, in other words, can you avoid being partisan? I'm going to reframe the question that way because I think that's really what it's getting at, is are you going to govern from the perspective of your ideology, which maybe covers 60% of the district, or 50, whatever percentage you want to assign, and not listen to the other 40%? And I guess my answer to that would be, I don't understand quite what that means. In other words, if the board makes a decision that some could interpret as partisan, but the decision is the correct decision that board members feel should be made for the interests of the city and the district and the students who are in it, does that make that decision partisan? I suppose, maybe, but if it's still the correct decision, then that's the decision that should be made, I think. So I don't quite know what that means, other than maybe it's a rhetorical kind of suggestion that you need to not be partisan and listen to a nonpartisan solution, which really maybe potentially means someone else's opinion, which they're kind of presenting as nonpartisan. So I don't quite know, but yeah, that's what.
So I think it's very important to make sure that there are platforms in which all members of the community can express their concerns, their things that they're happy about, things that they want to weigh in on. I don't believe that it's probably possible to weight everybody's opinion equally. I say that as a family of 4 who can't even decide where to go to eat together. And so I think that when you're looking to make big decisions that impact a lot of people, you're not always going to make everyone happy. And that is unfortunate. I wish there was a perfect scenario in which everyone would be happy with the decision. So I think that the best thing that you can do is kind of, in analytics, we really use that 80-20 rule. So for like 80%, can you you're going to have some on either end of the spectrum of where answers might lie, but can we aim to please and really weigh heavily the majority of their viewpoints? So I think that it's important to do that, and that when we're asking for feedback, that we are doing so in an accessible way. So for the senior community who might not have Facebook or even be familiar or comfortable with the internet, how do they have methods of providing their feedback? For students who want to give their feedback, do they know the ways in which that they can turn in and provide feedback to our administrators, to our board? Do our teachers, our staff, administrators have ways that they feel that they can give input? And do parents feel that they have ways, or that they know where they can go, as well as the community who might not have children in the school, but do have things that are important to them? How can they give them information? So I think making sure that there are ways, whether it's listening sessions, whether it's surveys that are both paper and online, whether it's some anonymous reporting methods, that there's a variety of ways that are allowing for the community to give feedback. And then I think that as a board member, the best you can do is to try to look at where that majority is falling, and kind of let that be your guiding light. And again, that doesn't mean that other individuals who might disagree with that aren't important, or that their opinion doesn't matter. I just think that it's really, really tough to try to please everybody. And so to be honest, I don't think you can weight everyone's thoughts and opinions the same.
So, as a board member currently, some of the things that I do to make sure that I feel like I'm listening to multiple different viewpoints is I read every single one of the emails. As board chair, it is standard practice for the board chair to respond on behalf of the board. So you get responses from me personally at this moment, but when asked for a response from me specifically in an email, I always did my best to give my constituents that response. I'm also approached at many public outings. I go to a lot of different sporting events. I'm at a lot of different activities. I'm in our schools. And I have people coming up and talking to me all the time. And not only that, but I always try and seek out the other opinion. So if I'm thinking one way, I try to really, if it's even just another board member that I don't agree with, like, can you explain to me what it is that you see as the benefit of the choice that you're trying to push for, or advocate for is the better word, sorry. So just really trying to keep my mind open to hear what that reason might be, because that might also ultimately impact the decision that I'm going to make. But yeah, just really making sure that I'm listening. My husband and I, when we went to some great military, like, couple type trainings, they taught a really great lesson about speaker listener. And I really try, even when I'm at the board table or even just in conversation with other people, to utilize that, which means I not only listen, but then I try and like rephrase what you're saying. So if you say that the sky is blue, I'm going to say, okay, so I hear you saying that the sky is blue. So not only now do you hear me repeating what you said to me, but now you can tell me if I was wrong. If I said it wrong, now you can have that opportunity to correct that opinion so that I understand you fully. And I think that that's been really helpful.
All right, I think my biggest thing would be the communication aspect of all this. I pride myself in my listening skills due to my profession of working in corrections, but I enjoy hearing both sides of everybody's opinions. Whether I agree with them or not, I love having sit-down conversations with everybody to get their points of view. Like I said, I may not always agree, but I know sometimes I'm not right, and that's okay. And I think that's one big thing everybody has to put in perspective of. We want to take the community's input as much as possible. We are doing this also for the kids as well, to make sure we put them on the front line of what our decisions are going to be. Yes, it may not make the community happy, but it will be best for what our kids need in our district. As far as doing that, I also, with kids in the sports, I'm always out and about in the community. I enjoy, like I said, talking to people and doing all of that, and I do everything I can to listen, like I said, listen to everybody. But, like everybody has also said, you're not gonna please everybody. The goal is to make the right decisions that are put in front of us. I know as a board, they're not always gonna be easy. They might always make people happy or mad, but we're here for a reason to help our children through this district and make it the best possible.
Community input is very important, and my 3.5 years on the board, we've thought of it, and it's been very helpful. Sometimes it's frustrating because, as people up here have recognized, often you can't reconcile 2 or 3 or 4 different views on one topic. So it definitely gets to be a balancing test. I approach it a lot like Tricia said. I seek out those opinions that maybe differ from the majority of the people that are communicating with us, or differ from how I had a knee-jerk reaction to an issue. I always do want to hear what the opposing views are, and you know, like I said, sometimes it's not just one view versus another. Sometimes there's multiple competing interests you're dealing with. You've got perhaps community members thinking one thing, other community members thinking another, district administration suggesting another, teachers thinking they've got an interest in it being handled differently. So yeah, it's very important to gather all the information before you make a decision at the board table. I do want to go off on a little bit of a tangent and just ask the community at large, people here, people listening, please reach out more to us. As much as we've heard from people in the last 3.5 years, I do want to hear from people more often. And one of the things I think is missing is, sure, we get a lot of input before we have to make a decision. Vote this way, you should vote that way. One thing we don't get much of is people holding us accountable and asking, well, how did that end up? You know, you resolved an issue, and where did it end? And, you know, I'll take the books. We talked about that earlier. Not everybody in our community is aware that we have this process where parents can give permission for a child to check out their book. People, if they ask and hold us accountable for how did this resolve, we're happy to share that. Sometimes you're going to get more accurate information, or to the superintendent or the district office, than you would by word of mouth elsewhere. So, yeah, I really appreciate more engagement. And not to say it's not on us also to communicate that. Of course, it's part of the job of the school board, the administration, to communicate the things that are happening in our district. But back and forth and a partnership in that communication is very important. The last thing I would say, since it sounds like I have a few seconds left, is not just seeking out opposing views is important, but recognizing them at the board table deliberations. That's also very important. So one thing I like to do at the board table is kind of play devil's advocate. You know, we'll have an issue up for discussion. I might be leaning one way, but I might raise a point on the other side and get the discussion going. I like to do that. I think it's important, and that way everybody gets a chance at the board table to consider different views. So that's how I would plan to continue to operate.
I guess the communication and transparency is huge. I mean, everyone in here's got a different opinion. I don't care what you're talking about. Everyone's going to have their own opinion on everything. And like at my work, I'm a business rep with 3,800 members. We got 3,800 members. Each one of them's got a different opinion on what we're discussing, right? I think it's very important to listen to everybody, compile, work together as a group, and to come together as a board to have a solid decision. And like I say, there's a lot of issues that affect students and parents, but there's also a lot of financial parts that affect the whole community, and there's, in my opinion, there is zero communication when it comes to the things that affect the whole community as a whole. And that's, you know, we forget about the people that don't have kids in the district that aren't in the know. Yeah, I think that's very important as far as getting the information, being able to have different opinions, have listening sessions, have meetings, get people's opinions. I think that's the only way to do it, and I think everyone up here is in agreement. You're not always going to keep everybody happy all the time, but as long as we can keep everything moving forward and doing what we need to do for the students to have a good education, I think that's the way to move forward.
Are you endorsed by any special interest groups, for example, the teachers union?
Negative. I've made it pretty clear on my campaign that I wasn't going to fundraise. We're doing this all on me and my wife. I don't have any endorsements that I'm running on. A lot of help and support from the community. I got to thank the people out in St. Stephen, St. Wendell, Lasac, Brockway Township, the city of Sartell. The support's been amazing, but no, I have not got any special interest endorsements.
I was happy to be endorsed by the teachers union. That's the only endorsement I've received. The fundraising I've done for yard signs, and basically that's about it so far that I've done for campaign spending. It has all been from Sartell residents and St. Stephen residents. Very much a grassroots effort, but yeah, I did participate in the teachers union endorsement process. They did a written question to all the candidates, and I was one of them that replied and endorsed them. I think that's a really important group, obviously, because without our teachers, we don't have schools ranked in the top 10 or 15 in the state. So I appreciate the work they do. I appreciate that they appreciate the work I've done on the board, but by getting that endorsement, don't view that as anything that locks me into like always having to decide for the teachers and in their best interests. I'm still here representing the community as a whole, Sartell St. Stephen community. So yep, that's all. Thank you.
I have not received any endorsement from anybody running independent. Like Mike said, I wasn't looking for any endorsements. All the campaign spending I've done has been out of pocket for myself, for my family, as far as signs and cards and anything go. I do think the teachers are very important, but I felt running as an independent and being open to everybody and listening to everything was kind of the way I wanted to go.
So in terms of spending, I raised all of my money from local people in the Sartell St. Stephen area, as well as allowing my parents or my children's grandparents to support me. And then I also did get the nomination for a teachers union endorsement, which I was very happy to get because I do think that our teachers are very important. I think it's also important to remember that a lot of our teachers don't always live in Sartell and St. Stephen, and this is the one way for them to make sure that their voices are heard. So thank you for that support.
Just to also, I guess, clarify what to me endorsement means, it would be kind of like an organized group of individuals that has determined that they want to kind of back or support you, and that doesn't necessarily mean it in a financial way. So I think just this week in the news leader, there was a flyer that was that did seem to promote some of the candidates on the panel, and so to me that is kind of endorsement, and that is also what I did receive from the teachers union. So again, no financial support on that end, but they did send out a questionnaire. I do think that they're an important group to our community. They have helped us get as high as we have in our district with scores and how our students are doing. So they are an important group to me. Without teachers, you don't have much of a district. So I have been endorsed by them, and I am proud to say.
So using Chelsea's expanded definition, which I think I agree with on a philosophical level, yes, I did receive a recommendation from that group, which I didn't know was coming, and that wasn't communicated to me prior or anything. I believe I also received a recommendation from the Minnesota Parents Alliance. That was a questionnaire that was submitted that I filled out, and so they put me on the voter guide, so okay. I have raised $0 in contributions, so I'm all self-funded. I think my expenses to date are $602.88. So I haven't hit the $750 cap yet to submit a campaign finance report, but that'll be coming because you got to submit that within so much time before the election. And then I have two $50 in-kind contributions from Ray Trobeck, the owner of Trobeck's Bar and Grill in St. Stephen, who let me host a town hall at his restaurant. So those are all my contributions to date.
Yeah, let's use that. Sorry, I don't get any weird feedback. Michael Gruber's website says our schools have lost trust with our community. Michael Ringstead has removed his kids from the district. That is not my experience. Do you trust our teachers and trust your kids with them?
I wouldn't know because my kids don't. I think maybe what that question is getting at is if your kids aren't in the district, how can you therefore come up and represent a district if you are not a primary customer of that district? And I guess what I would suggest is there are thousands of other district residents and voters who do not have kids in the district. Public institutions represent the public, so the schools are a community within a broader community. And therefore, I think those community members have a voice because public institutions should represent the voices and values of the public. I just want to, I was kind of prepared for this, so this is from the Minnesota School Board Association Deputy Executive Director, Gary Lee is his name. He was just in the St. Cloud Live last week. I just want to read what he wrote because I think it's a great summary of what I'm getting at. Candidates are not required to have any prior experience in the field of education or have children enrolled in their school district. Lee said this is important because it allows members of the community to be involved in schools. Public schools are our community, and those schools are communities within the community that they reside, Lee said. We need representatives of this community to give guidance to the school district itself that is within the norms and the beliefs of the community as a whole. So I think that really gets at that's why these 6 seats are responding to the public. That's why we're having a candidate for them. We're not appointed to these seats. They're not volunteer seats. These are seats that are subject to the whim of voters. And that's very intentional, and that's because the school district exists as a public institution, and therefore institutions, at least in our country, because we have a Republican form of government, those institutions are responsive to, or at least should be, and should represent the norms and values of voters. So.
Okay, so I think the question was, do I trust our teachers and do I trust my students with our teachers? And yes, I don't just trust our teachers. I tend to be pretty trustworthy of teachers in general. I've had great academic experiences and experiences with teachers on my own, and have been fortunate that our daughters have had excellent experiences, both at All Saints Academy and now at Sartell. To me, teachers go through quite a lot of training, and there's a lot of oversight. There's state standards on what should be taught and what they need to learn. So I think, and there's textbooks that they work out of. So I think for the most part, at least I haven't experienced any teachers going super rogue and kind of teaching what they want to decide to teach. Now everyone has their own flair, but I think as someone who is raising our daughters to grow up and enter into a very diverse community and work field, that's okay and that's important. And so that's what allows them to come home and say, oh, you know, we learned about this today, and you know, maybe there was a bit of a personal flair or a story that a teacher told to help explain it in a different way, and my student maybe didn't quite understand it or maybe didn't agree with it, but then that opens it up for additional communication and us to have kind of those back and forths. So all of that to say is, yes, I trust not just our teachers, I trust teachers, and yes, I trust my students with teachers.
So I have a somewhat similar background. My oldest son actually we lived in St. Cloud, so we started out at St. Cloud, and then we brought our kids over to All Saints Academy, and then we moved into Sartell. And I would echo what Chelsea just said. I don't just trust the teachers of Sartell. I would trust the teachers pretty much in all three of those places and probably beyond with my children at any time. They have been amazing, and who better than to oftentimes help me as a parent become a better parent, because sometimes there are things that I haven't experienced with my kids, and who better than to, and I guess I feel really fortunate that I've been able to communicate with my kids' teachers and say, like, I'm seeing this at home, and like, what have you done? And I've been able to have great conversations with them, and partnered with them to make sure that not only are my kids doing well, but to hopefully support them as well. So yeah, I totally trust the teachers.
As of right now, with all the dealings I've had with my two kids and the teachers, I do trust the teachers that we do have in our district, and I do believe that they all have the best interest for our kids. But I just would like, there's been points where the communication's not quite there from what I would expect from teachers for my kids, and when they've had struggles and whatnot. So a little bit better communication would be great, but as of trusting the teachers we have in our district, I have no problems with trusting my kids and anybody else's children with it. I've had nothing but good experiences, but the communication could be a little better.
Yeah, to the broad question of do I trust my kids with our teachers? Unequivocally, I do. It's general sense. One thing I trust our teachers to do is teach my kids that there's all different personalities out there. There's all different types of people who will have different expectations for you and hold you accountable in different ways. And I really appreciate that. My oldest just got to high school, my youngest is in middle school, and even at those ages, these kids catch on to that stuff real quick. They can pick up on when certain teachers have certain views on certain things, and just, you know, the way they approach their job. It's really impressive. So yeah, I think it's a great part of our kids' education is that see teachers who approach the job in all different ways and form relationships with their students in all different ways. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I fully support the teachers. I have trust them. My daughter went through kindergarten, first grade, second grade in Sartell. We absolutely loved it. The teachers were amazing. Everything was going good until the COVID thing. And the board made the decision to keep masking kids, which devastated us because our youngest couldn't even pass the entry exam for kindergarten because she couldn't understand what when you go take your kindergarten testing to get into kindergarten, she couldn't understand what she was asking her with the mask and stuff on, so she was struggling to get into that thing. And at that point, when they made the decision to mask the kids, my wife and I made the decision that it was better for us to move to a neighboring school district up in Holdingford, but I 100% have the teachers back. I think they do an amazing job. I've never had a problem with the teachers. Like I said, my oldest daughter went through second grade, and we had nothing but awesome experiences. The only thing that made us change our mind was the decision to mask our kids, and our youngest was struggling with that, so that's when we moved districts. Teachers have my 100% support.
What do you want to accomplish on the school board if elected?
You know, me and my wife built 2 houses in this school district just for that fact, and we had all intentions of our kids going to Sartell School District, going through school, graduating. It's an amazing place. It's an amazing community. I want to get back to the reputation it had when I moved to this area, and hopefully whoever gets elected, we can figure out the dysfunction, get the board running in the right direction, everybody can get on the same page, move forward, do what we gotta do for the kids, do what we gotta do for the teachers, the staff, the community. I mean, we had lots of options where we could go. We picked this school district, and I want to see it get back to the reputation it once had.
I'm not running on a particular agenda. I don't have an agenda of specific items that I need to accomplish. But some of the things that I think will be important in the next term that I do want to make sure get accomplished are, first of all, before the end of this next 4-year term, we as a district, and I mean that community-wide, we're going to have to address changes to our mission statement, strategic plan, and then administration can run with that and create a new district operational plan. That's typically done every 5 years, and we did a lot of work on that a couple summers ago. So that's one of the main things I want to do, and I want to make sure there's plenty of community involvement again when we do that. We have facilities needs, and we've had them for quite some time. I want to see those get approved and finalized and constructed. For anybody who doesn't know, facilities needs we have in the district include, I think Tricia mentioned this earlier, the HVAC system at Riverview Intermediate School. That's the original high school to our district, down by the football field. Most of that system was built in the 60s, and most of the rest of it was built in the mid-80s, and it's way past its lifetime, and only getting more expensive the longer it takes to approve that project. Look for a voter referendum ballot on that item, and a separate question on the high school stadium coming early this coming year, either in February or April. It'll go out to the public for vote and for approval. And not just approval, and there's going to have to be administration of all those projects going on over the next few years as those projects are ongoing. Another one that's probably not as well known is the Benton Stearns Education District that I serve on. Is even in more dire need of facilities than anything here in Sartell St. Stephen's School District. Their main facility for their high school age kids over in Sauk Rapids is way, way beyond its useful life. We are on the right track on that. At this board meeting this month, when we approved our preliminary budget for the coming year, we included some new monies that are allotted to special ed facilities specifically for cooperatives like ours, and that's a very new thing that the state legislature has allowed us to finance. So what we're looking to do there is get into a lease for a long-term lease, 15, 20 years, for a facility that's built out custom that can host all of our students and staff that work for Benton, go to Benton Stearns schools, because right now they're very disjointed. We have our main office on 2nd Street here in Sartell. We have, it's actually just down the road here, we've got the Sauk Rapids facility for the older kids, and then the building that houses our district office.
30 seconds.
We lease out the other half of that building to Benton Stearns for their programming. So that's very much a need, and something I hope gets finalized within, certainly within the next year, but definitely would hope for it to be sooner than that. So yeah, those are goals of mine. Appreciate the chance to get to them.
One of the big things I think I would like to see accomplished is make sure that all of our students feel like they're safe in our district. That's always been my big thing. That's the reason I'm running and doing this, is for the kids' safety, and make sure, whether it's bullying or just not feeling safe for whatever reason, that gets looked into and gets taken care of. Also, the health and welfare of the kids are also high priority, whether that means an HVAC system or whatever they need as far as facility needs. I'm not as well versed as Matt in some of those, but that is also a big priority for me. As far as everything else, I mean, we're gonna have to work, no matter who on this two tables gets elected, it's gonna have to be a consensus and you're gonna have to work together for the kids. You can't pick sides, you gotta do what's right in the end.
So what do I want to accomplish on the board? I'm very similar to Matt yet again. I don't have any specific goals. I think when I was first running, Pat actually, I think it was you, shared that it's not good to have like one goal in mind, because what happens when that goal is reached? So even when I was running the first time, I really tried to stay away from having a set goal, because things pop up, things happen. When I ran 4 years ago, Riverview, we knew it was a need, but man, has it changed in 4 years from a need that was like we could be put off to now like we really need to deal with that issue. So I do want to point out that we do still have an amazing district. I would like to continue to see it be amazing. We have a 98% graduation rate. That is something to be amazingly proud of, and I am. And then I think we have really great staff, so trying to make sure that we retain that staff, make sure that we learn to communicate even better. I would definitely agree with some of the other comments of the other people up here that I think we do a good job, but we could do a great job, and I think we need to continue to improve our communication. Parents are using different tools, and that changes on a regular basis, so I think if I was going to have one specific goal, it would be to continue to see our communication only improve. And that's from the board table to our teachers to everyone in our district, because I think we can always be growing and learning to do better.
I think I have things that are important to me that I would bring to the table as we continue to support our school's mission and strategic plan. And to Matt's point, 2022 was the last time that was created, and with that was a community engagement survey. So expecting that within this next term that would come around to fruition again, and I would love to see that community input increase. In 2022, there's about 700 individuals that responded to that survey, which seems really light considering the size of our district and the interest and support that we have from community members, as shown even by how full this room is tonight. So I would like to see that engagement continue, for us to have ways of gathering community feedback, and doing so with having a student-centered focus in mind. I think that safety in our schools, whether it's physical, environmental, psychological, is necessary to the academic success of our students. And so if we are also wanting to ensure that we continue to have high scores and are a top district, that we have to make sure that we are looking at all aspects of safety. So my goal would be to ensure that making sure that our policies support that, and then doing whatever I can to support our administrators in carrying that out throughout the operations of the district. And coming, hearing all the things that are kind of needed in the district, financial responsibility is a big part of that. And so as a data-driven individual, my goal would be to ensure that we are keeping the community in mind when it comes to finances, and trying to be really fiscally responsible while also balancing the needs of our district, and doing so with the feedback of the community along the way.
So I think the big challenge to public education writ large, probably nationally, certainly in the state of Minnesota and in our district, is that people are making choices about where to send their kids, making alternative choices based on their perception of the social, cultural values and the political emphases in public education. That's just a fact. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree with that perception. You could say, well, that hasn't been my experience in public schools. You don't have to agree that it's a priority. But I think it's pretty clear, based on statewide data, that that's what's happening, okay? 4 years of consecutive enrollment decline for public schooling in statewide across the state of Minnesota. We're probably on track for our 5th year. That's been true for Sartell, St. Stephen as well. Private schooling and homeschooling combined have had 6 consecutive years of growth. Homeschooling in the state of Minnesota last year had a 10% growth. That is absurd. If we had a 10, you know how many students we would add to our enrollment roster if we had a 10% growth in Sartell St. Stephen? We would have 400 kids. So that just hasn't materialized, and that's a crisis. I realize a lot of those problems are upstream of what the board is going to be able to do, because what is that, right? That's a social, cultural, anthropological problem, right? And that's not something that a small 20,000 town population municipal school board is going to be able to tackle, right? But I think that is the crisis, and I think we need to be crafty as a board to communicate that to the public and to sort of illustrate that maybe we're doing something different, because parents talk. And if you're a parent, you know what it's like. You get to that 3 to 4 year old range where you're going to decide where to send your kid to schools, and you go, I don't know what's happening over there, but we're not doing that, right? That's what happens. And if we don't get ththose kids in those pre-K years, then there's just a slim likelihood that they're going to be able to continue on. Because once you get the kids in the schools during the 3 to 4 year old pre-K years, there's a high likelihood that parent's going to follow through all the way, right? Because the kid knows the schools, they start learning the institution, they learn the teachers, and they say, okay, people talk the game, but it's not that bad here. So that's the crisis. And that has financially, I mean, there's just all sorts of implications for that, not just for the school district, but also financially for the city of Sartell, because schools have kind of a pacifying effect on surrounding areas as well, which was a big emphasis that Mayor Dave Kleiss had in St. Cloud. It's the reason why the city hall actually moved into the Tech High School building as well when they moved to the south side and built a new one, right? So we have to maintain public schools in Sartell. We want robust institutions, and if we care about the long-term longevity of the health of those institutions, we have to address the problems that are fueling enrollment decline.
Do you support teaching, or do you support the teaching of state standards as they are written?
Two parts to that, I think. One is, I think, what is your personal opinion about state standards? And then secondly is, what is your position about what the board should do as a governing body about ensuring that state standards are met, right? I think the approach of some of the school boards towards this issue, Anoka Hennepin's a great example, has probably not been positive, in my opinion. I don't, holding up budget requirements over curriculum demands and making it so that your seniors can't even graduate that year is not a good idea, so that's not something I would be in support of. But I personally, do I have some disagreements with some of the state legislation that's come out of St. Paul? Yeah, I do. Does that mean that I should, or that as a board, we should make decisions about whether or not our schools should be meeting those standards? Well, I think that's a different discussion. And like someone else answered before regarding teachers, teachers have a lot of leeway. They have different emphases. You have different ways of approaching topics and addressing them and teaching them. And so on top of that, the board kind of getting into the particular demands of teachers to teach certain ways, in my mind, kind of crosses over what the board's function is, which is governance, not operations. So that's really something we would have to communicate through the superintendent anyway. But yeah, I on a personal level, I think some of the state standards, especially the ethnic studies requirement, is something that I really don't agree with. But again, in terms of our functions as a board, that would kind of step over, I think, the purpose of the board's existence.
I'm not sure I can honestly answer this because I have not read through the state standards in some time, so I would probably need to familiarize myself with how they are written. But what I can say is, at least from the concept of them and having dealt with them not only as a student when they were introduced, but also how they have impacted my students. So If you would have asked 12th grade Chelsea, she would have hated them because I was doing full-time post-secondary, and I had to take an additional class at the high school because it was needing for the state standards, and so I wasn't happy at that time about it, but overall I think that the state standards have helped create some well-rounded standards that regardless of what district you might go to, if you're going to be in public education, that you can expect to be taught about the same concepts. And so I do think that having standards is important. And while there might be certain things about how the state standards are carried out, which I think is largely, it can be on the board to help set the policies that set the vision and the strategic direction of the board, but really supporting our administrators so that as they work through the operational way the district functions with the teachers, that we can just be there to support them in ensuring that they have the resources that they need to carry out those state standards. And again, I think as a board member, there's a little that we can do to impact those state standards. So it's just a matter of ensuring that we are helping provide our district with the resources and guidance to carry them out.
So I would definitely agree with how Michael said that it would completely be going above and beyond our governance role. Are there teaching standards as they're written? I don't believe as a board member there is anything I can do or say. It is our job to ensure that our teachers have the material and the supplies that they need to make sure that their rooms are operating functionally. And we can look at different curriculums, and we have the power to vote to say, yes, we want to do CKLA this year with Amplify. But otherwise, I don't know that really matters what my personal opinion would be. It's just that that's what we have to do as a district. I don't know that that's a choice.
I guess they've kind of all said it. Personal and professional aside, other things that I don't agree with, there's probably a couple things that all of us don't agree with on their standards. Do I think they're working? As far as watching my children go through the district, I think that it's working out just fine for what they need. I know all kids are different in how they learn and how they go about having to do things. That's just the way the world works. But like everybody else has said, as far as the board goes, it'd be overstepping on the board's part to try to change anything that's overreaching in general in any kind of area, in my opinion.
I think we're all in agreement that this question is a little more relevant to a state legislator. It's really not so much a question that a school board member can address, in the sense that we really have no choice but to teach to the state standards. Yes, of course, I support that. So and Chelsea, don't feel bad that you haven't read them. I haven't read them lately either. So this is not a particular area of concern or study of mine. And it just highlights the fact that we have a relationship with district administration where we delegate many of the operational tasks to them, this being one of them, teaching to the state standards, creating the curriculum, coming to us with approval or for approval for new curriculum when it's needed, like Tricia mentioned, our new K-5 reading program. But this is largely irrelevant to a school board member. So I would just say, yes, of course we have to teach standards because we're required to.
I agree with everybody up here that state standards, and I would just add that I think it's important to have a statewide, you're unified on standards just for people moving around and whatnot if they move districts or whatever. I guess the top three that the school board would be the top three things that we look at would be annual budget, setting policy, curriculum, and hiring and evaluating the superintendent. That's our function, unless Mr. Rivard or the superintendent would come up to us and ask us to help them somehow. But yeah, that's out of our realm, in my opinion.
Minnesota statute 211B.04 Fair campaign practices states that all campaign materials must be included in a promptly displayed disclaimer that includes the name and address of the person or committee causing the material to be prepared or disseminated. Do you believe there should be consequences when this required disclaimer is not included on campaign signs?
I can only speak for myself. All the signs that I've been associated with or put up are paid for, prepared by all the ones that I put up personally have a sticker on them or they're printed on them that say paid, prepared for by my.
Can you repeat the last part of the question? I think I missed it.
Do you believe there should be consequences when this required disclaimer is not included on campaign signs? They're asking about the disclaimer that certainly goes right on the bottom of the sign.
Yeah, I mean, this is statutory, obviously. You gave us the statute number. I haven't read it recently. I'd say the same as Mike as far as materials I put out indicate that I'm the one that paid for them. I don't know about consequences, but if there are stakeholders or groups out there putting up signs on behalf of other candidates that aren't those candidates, I think they should be required to identify themselves. So consequences, I don't know, but yeah, I'd like to know, and I think the public would appreciate knowing who prepared and paid for everything, because that's what's required under the law.
I mean, I'm along with both of them. As far as I know, all the signs that personally paid for have prepared and paid for by myself that I have put out. And as far as consequences, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what we can do to look at it, but there probably should be something in place to an extent.
So I hate to be repeating, but yes, all of the signs that I currently have paid for by Tricia Lee for school board. In terms of consequences, I guess, I don't know who would enforce such consequences, but I mean, I guess the simple thing would be take the signs down. I don't know who would be responsible for doing that. I don't know. I guess that'd be really the question I would ask is, if we have consequences, who's responsible for making sure that they're followed? Because I think a rule without someone to actually enforce is kind of a moot point.
I probably sounds repetitive, but I do believe that all the signs that I have out with my name on it do have who they are paid for by. If there's any signs out there that have my name on it and don't have that disclaimer, I would want to be reached out to by the community so that I could try to get in contact with whoever might have those signs so that I could correct that. Because I do believe in trying to follow kind of the rules for the purpose of having a fair campaign and transparency to the community of who's paying for certain things. So, but to kind of Tricia's point, without having, you know, identifying who the correct group is to enforce that, yes, hopefully when rules are made at a certain level, there should be the identified group to enforce that.
I mean, the simple answer is you could probably just look at case law and look at statutory violators and see what the punishments have been. And so there you go. I don't know. Yeah, sure. This is kind of a leading question. So if you think that I've put up a sign that doesn't promptly display who's paying for it, send me an email, mgruberschoolboard@gmail.com. Let me know. We'll take them down or put a thing on it. It's fine. So sure, sounds good.
If elected, how will you support students and staff?
Again, listening is important. The board being available to hear concerns is part of that process. I think really critical is the board having a functional and healthy relationship with the superintendent. And my impression has been over the last 3 years of paying attention to board meetings is that has not always been the case with some of our previous superintendents. I felt the relationship was sometimes antagonistic, or was not very, I wouldn't say cordial, because I don't have privy knowledge to that, but yeah, so I think that's really, because that's how you're going to get information about staff primarily anyway, is through your superintendent. So I think that's kind of foundational to that.
So it was, can you repeat the question?
No problem. If elected, how will you support students and staff?
So supporting our students, I think a great place to start would be to ensure that their voices are being heard. So I would love to see more engagement and feedback opportunities from the student body. Identifying that a lot of that's going to probably come from your high school, maybe even middle school levels, just based off of where they're at in life and what type of feedback that they might have. But I think it is important to kind of give them a voice. I know that we have, the board has the student representatives on the school board. I know we have middle school student councils, we have high school student councils, we also have school officers. And so, as well as a lot of different academic and athletic groups. And so, we get to hear from them. I think they come to the school board at the end of their season to kind of report out on how things are going. It would be great to kind of expand on that and give them additional opportunities for providing feedback on what can the school do to support them more, or do they have any concerns? Are there things that are difficult? I also think that it's important to give staff, whether it is your educators, your administrators, your paraprofessionals, your food service, or bus drivers, that everyone is clear on ways that they can reach out when they have concerns or want to talk about things that maybe are working well or it's not working well. And so having open communication and making sure that individuals, that there's clear accessibility to what those communication methods are, and then listening and hearing them out. So yes, I think it's very important to support our students and our staff. They are essential to our district, and so just ensuring that we have a variety of methods and make them known for how they can reach out so that we can get their feedback and listen to what they have to say.
So if elected, how would I support students and staff? So I think right now, one of the things that Chelsea just mentioned is our student rep. This year we actually altered that so that it's not just our student council students that can fill out that form, which I think is a huge improvement. So next spring, I would encourage anyone interested in the high school that's a junior or going to be a junior, senior, if they're interested, to please fill out that form. I think that'll be a great way for us to engage with students. But I also just sitting here thinking, listening to you, that, we also have student council at the middle school, and we also have student council at Riverview, which was new last year. If there's ways that we as board members could maybe rotate and take turns, maybe even going to their meetings here and there, maybe it's a couple times a year, not being strangers, allowing us to come in and just listen if they had some ideas. And I don't know, just a way that I was thinking. Also, I think with staff, they have very regular meetings. If there was a way for us as board members to potentially be at a staff meeting just at the end of it or at the beginning of it, for staff to be able to engage if they have concerns and just want to share some good news or share some troubles, but just really try to be more out there and more present. I do feel that I am doing a fairly good job, but there's always room for improvement. But yeah, that's some of my ideas.
My opinion on helping supporting students and staff is communication is going to be key. But as a board, I know most of that's going to be happening to the superintendent, so the relationship between the board and the superintendent is super important, so that communication can be disseminated down to the staff and everybody that works in our buildings, teachers, staff, the students. But I do think trying to make sure there's a way that the students and the teachers and the staff in general, everybody knows ways to voice their opinions, to email their opinions, to get them to us, so that we can make sure that there's an open line of communication between the board and everybody. That way no one is feeling left out and everybody's getting heard.
point out that supporting students and having them be the primary focus when the board faces decisions is required under our code of ethics. Not that we get to ignore the other considerations and other stakeholder interests, but it's right in our code of ethics for our school district that we primarily consider the best interests of our student body when we decide issues. So one way I kind of coattailing on some of the other comments about how our student rep on the school board interacts with the board. An idea I've had lately that I'd like to maybe push at the board table is instead of that person giving us reports and only reports from the buildings on just the happenings in the buildings, which I very much appreciate and are very good to hear about, they're entertaining. I'd like to expand the role of the student rep to be a little bit more of a liaison to bring feedback back to us from the student groups that maybe Tricia mentioned. Because our student reps, obviously, they're the ones in the school buildings. They're best positioned to get that feedback, relay it to us as board members so that we're better informed about what's actually happening in our school buildings from a student perspective. And then, like Chelsea said, I agree, we need to make a point of celebrating our students and staff, even more than we do now. And we've gradually built that up over the last couple of years. It started under Superintendent Ryle Hoover. He really made a conscious effort to get students and staff recognized in front of the school board. Because yeah, it's been alluded to up here. People were pretty down after COVID, and we needed a boost. We needed a morale boost, and it was important that we did it then. It's just as important that we do it now and continue to recognize the great work that our staff especially does.
Yeah, I would have full support for students and staff. Communication would be huge. We don't get the communication back to us if there's issues or whatever. It's hard to make people to help support them. Watching the school board meetings or attending them and the student rep, I see him walk in here. He does an amazing job. I don't know his name offhand, but he does an amazing job there. That kind of communication, if you could get more people to get that involved and communicate in that realm, that's amazing. Teachers as well. Obviously, you have to have a good relationship with the superintendent to keep on track of what issues or what's going on. But yeah, I think that's communicating back and forth and having good relationships.
So this will be our final question, so we ensure that they have time to do their final statements or their closing statements. The contract issue was contentious. The heart of the issue is who has ultimate authority, the superintendent or the duly elected school board. Is it your view that the board should defer authority to the superintendent and rubber stamp his recommendations, or do you think elected officials have full and final authority? I can reread it if you want.
No, I think I got most of it. I took notes on this one because I figured it was going to be coming up. But in my opinion, the controversy resulting from the contract discussion was unnecessary. In my opinion, state statute gives the school board full and final authority over contracts being approved. And Robert's rules, what I'm used to and how we operate, is you can have consent agenda items on there, lumping stuff together, but if one board member per se wants to go through them individually, therefore them issues or items should have gone through individually in February when initially asked. People may disagree on the reason, but according to state statute, gives the school board final authority over contracts. And when you go through Robert's rules, it states in there that if you want to consent items together, it's got to be unanimous. So, hope that answers the question.
So, there was a lot in the question, but there's a lot of context. I just give a little background on what happened. We had a group of 20-some folks who are on individual contracts with the district. A lot of them are housed at our district office, but not all of them. Out of them are directors that are on the org chart right under the superintendent. The problem that I saw with voting on these contracts individually is that we have already delegated the authority for evaluating these people and managing their employment to the superintendent and the superintendent direct reports. So I found it inappropriate for the school board then to try to put itself in the position where we would have the authority to specifically for one individual contract, hire or fire that person. It was confirmed to us by our legal counsel that not renewing a contract essentially terminated employment for that person. So we as a school board had no established procedure for evaluating these employees. Most of them I don't even know or see work on to any extent, let alone on a daily basis, like our superintendent and their direct supervisors do. So yeah, in that instance, I found it inappropriate that we would go and vote on these contracts individually. I thought it was much more appropriate that we keep them grouped together. And that didn't mean that they weren't still individual contracts. We saw in this round that certain people were being recommended to have different pay increases or different provisions put in specific individual contracts. So it's not like we were inappropriately treating them as a bargaining unit. They would still all just sign a contract that was between themselves as an individual and the school district. But to put ourselves as a school board in a place of essentially evaluating whether this person is fit to remain in our district when we don't have that advisory authority over those, did not add up either morally or legally in my mind.
So the end of that was asking about the rubber stamping, correct?
It says, the board, is it your view that the board should defer authority to the superintendent and rubber stamp his recommendations, or do you think elected officials have full and final authority?
I think as a board, it's a decision that you're going to make with the superintendent most times and come to a conclusion of, does every position fit what you need when, as their individual, since they're individual contracts, yes, they've been voted on in the past as a group, but do they individual contracts meet as need? As somebody who's worked in different places, and I've worked in HR in the military, never been part-time. So that part of it, I understood wanting a full-time employee to deal with all of your staff. If your people are working, there's no reason that they shouldn't be. So that's personal opinion on that one. I don't agree in rubber stamping. That's the only reason. The other reason that I'm trying to go through this is, yes, I understand he's the one, the superintendent's the one that works with your staff. I get that. He's going to know them the best. He's going to be the one that gives their evaluations. But it is part of state statute that gives the board authority that to work with the superintendent to make sure that all of the needs are being met for the district.
So our first original vote was in February. We held off voting in March because there was some language within the contracts that needed to be looked at by the attorney. We hosted a May work session that ended up getting, I believe that one was closed. We had a closed session so that we could freely talk as board members. May we had another meeting where we voted and it was a 3-3. June we had we went into another closed session to talk about attorney-client privilege information. And then we again met at our regular June meeting. So I think just to clarify, the order of events is very important. I don't think in any of that time frame, from my perspective, we were rubber stamping anything. I also would like to point out that our superintendent is a non-voting member of the board, and that our superintendent is the person that is evaluating these people. So from my perspective, none of the information that was shared with me would have risen to the point of going over the superintendent's recommendation. If board members, through those closed sessions or through other meetings, had given information to me or shared information with me that would have risen to that occasion, that would have been a different conversation. So I do not agree in rubber stamping, but I do think that if you are going to change the standard practice that our board is operating under, which is our superintendent evaluating those employees, I think there needs to be a justification that all board members agree upon to then change course and use a different method.
I think, so no, I don't think that an elected official has full and final authority to just make decisions on their own. There is a checks and balances, and there are organizations in place, structure for how things operate. So I do think that they have a responsibility to how financially the district is operating and to overseeing the superintendent. But as a manager myself, I did 8 performance reviews this year, and they go up to our chief human resource officer, who kind of gives a blanket approval on HR. If she were to come back to me and then start to, challenge how I assessed the individuals on my team when she doesn't work with them or doesn't understand what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, that would be really hard for me. And so I think part of it is, having delegated that authority to the superintendent, having chosen that superintendent through the interim process, that there is a certain level of needing to trust them to do their job. And kind of like what Tricia said, this was first brought up in February, so there was certainly opportunities to discuss and have open and honest conversations about what concerns there might be. Attending the school board meetings, even back in February, I think the concern I kept hearing was just that, approving them in a group or not. So to me, that's not necessarily, there wasn't a reason given as to why they needed to be looked at or not trusted as far as how the superintendent went about giving those performance assessments. So I do believe that there is a certain responsibility that elected officials have to the community, but I also think that there are roles and responsibilities, and that without respecting those, it can get chaotic, and so there is to still follow that path of authority.
I just turned, okay, sorry. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution promises to each state in this union a republican form of government. What that means is that the hierarchy of authority as it moves through kind of a, if you want to imagine it as a kind of a pyramid, starts with the people, who then vote for elected representatives who represent them on their behalf, who then shape the public institutions that they are responsible for overseeing in accord with the values and preferences of the electorate. That's how the United States of America functions. That's how republics are supposed to function. So in an ultimate sense, yes, elected representatives should have oversight authority over our public institutions. The reason why I think this country has such a trust crisis in so many aspects of its government, I mean, beyond that being kind of a traditional character of Americans more broadly, is because the impression has grown that our public institutions are not responsive to the demands of the electorate. The reason this room is filled, presumably, and you all are here, is because you have an interest in who represents you, because you have an intuitive understanding that as self-governing citizens of this country, the representatives you elect are going to make choices on your behalf to represent the values that you think should have priority. No? I think that's right. So, yes, I do ultimately think that elected representatives should have authority. In terms of, I went up to St. Stephen, I did a town hall 3 weeks ago. A guy asked me, what was that contracts thing all about? He termed it, he called it a nothing burger. It's kind of funny, I don't know. A nothing burger. He's like, well, because the conclusion of that was kind of like, well, whatever. And I think, well, that kind of hints at the issue, doesn't it? The motion to separate contracts was made in February, or certainly earlier than the deadline before it approached. And I think had the board simply assented to that, then we wouldn't have run into a crisis. So I think that kind of summarizes my sense of that. The last thing I'll say is that the only time items in the consent agenda should be bundled is for the board's expedience. If one board member wants to separate out an agenda item for individual consideration, we should do that, because I think that's helpful to the public. You can have discussion, you can make motions, you can make amendments to that particular item, and I think that's helpful, just as a matter of public disclosure, so that you know, okay, the board is singling this out. Why are they doing that? You can start to have discussion.
So for the final thing, it's going to be your guys' final statements. We have about 19 minutes. You each get 3 minutes, so that should end us at 7:59.
Well, I think the through line that maybe you've heard from me tonight is that I care about public institutions. Right, I have an institutional kind of emphasis in my in a lot of my answers, and that's because I've spent the majority of my adult life in public service. I was in the Army for 4.5 years. I did 2 combat tours to Afghanistan as a paratrooper, as a forward observer. I now have the privilege of serving veterans at the St. Cloud VA as a chaplain. I've been doing that for the last 5 years. So for the vast majority, or not vast, but majority of my adult life, I've been in public service. And so I just strongly believe that our public institutions need to function and do it in a way that represents the values and priorities of the public they serve. Because if they don't, that institution's going to crumble. People are not going to support it. People are not going to be enthused about supporting the institution. It will become a relic. It will become a monument, not something that's active and thriving and producing something that the public actually believes in. So I would say, to go back on just my previous answer, the reason we're here is because you are citizens of this country. You have a vote, you have a voice. And so I would just encourage all of us to assess for yourself who you think had the best diagnosis of the problems, who you think best offered solutions to those problems, and to vote accordingly, and to vote your conscience on that. That's your right. And you should do that. So I think that kind of wraps it up for me. The institutions are important. They should be healthy and robust. The key to doing that for our public institution, that is the school district, is to restore trust. And I think I've hopefully convinced you that I've provided some answers to that. Or maybe not, and that's okay too.
I just want to thank all of you for attending. It's really inspirational to see this amount of community come together in support of our school districts. Even if we don't all agree, it shows a certain passion for our schools, and I think that that's really important. I think I would make a good school board candidate because I am empathetic and open-minded, and I have a history of being in analytical positions, whether it's data, whether it's policies, whether it's processes. And so that is what I'd be looking to bring as a school board member, is to make data-informed and data-driven decisions. And that includes the data that's gathered from the community and the feedback from whether it being our educators, staff, administrators, students, and the community members. And I am very just passionate about this school district. It's why we moved here. I once had a teacher give me a lesson of perspective in looking at an apple from 2 different sides and how you can describe it very differently. But it's an apple. And so I think there are things that we can come and agree on as a community in common about this district and agreeing what's important to us. Have our students succeeding, safety, being fiscally responsible, and so focusing on the things that can bring us together instead of focusing on things in the past or continuing to focus on things that divide us.
I also want to thank everyone for being here tonight and also for the opportunity to engage with all of you. No matter what's decided at our election boxes in November, there's going to be 3 people from this table at our board table come January, and none of you are somebody that I would consider an enemy. I think we all here can agree that we're all here for students, and I think not only do we 6 need to remember that, so does our community. There's so much division in our country right now, and I think if everyone remembers to just take a step back and remember that, you know, I'm here for the betterment of students, Aaron is here for the betterment of students, Matt cares about students, Michael, Chelsea, we all care about students and parents and the staff. And if we can get back to a place where we put that first when we come into a discussion, whether it's something that we want to celebrate or something that we disagree about, if we can put that thought first, I think we'll be able to solve a lot more of our problems and celebrate more of our successes together and be a lot happier.
I'd also like to thank everybody for coming out and listening to all 6 of us give the answers that I think most reflect us. My big thing, like you heard me say, is the safety of the kids, to make sure that they think or they believe and they get the best education they can from our district. That's the big thing we're all here for, is to make sure we take care of our future. As far as community, open communication is what I hope to bring, if you choose to elect me, to the board. Opinions from both sides. I pride myself in my communication skills and being able to meet people in the middle and have those tough conversations when need be. I appreciate your time.
Thanks everybody for listening tonight. I'd start my closing by humbly asking for your vote. I think I've done a good job for the district. None of us 6 will be perfect board members in the next term. I was not a perfect board member in this past term. I'm humble enough to understand that. I think I bring a strong candidacy to this position. I've got the experience that I've gained over the past 3.5 years, the relationship I've built. I talked earlier about how I represent this district on boards elsewhere and have built trusting relationships with other groups that our school district deals with. I have the analytical and communication skills from my job as an attorney. I've got the right temperament for this. I think I've shown that at the board table over 3.5 years of often very difficult conversations. I always focus on the students first, just like what's required under our code of ethics. And I come into issues with an open mind when we face them at the board table. And before we even do that, I go to the community with open ears. So I like hearing various viewpoints. It's actually kind of a hobby being in the lawyer business. You're constantly arguing back and forth and trying to figure out how to solve problems. So, the bottom line is this. Our district's in great shape right now. If anybody saw Dr. Rivard's analysis that was in the news on Friday, in reading and math proficiency of 331 school districts in Minnesota, we are 15th in math and 18th in reading. And that deserves a standing ovation wherever that would be appropriate, because that is outstanding work by our students and staff to reach those. And those scores are rising. We're one of the few districts in this area where those scores are going up in the past few years. I know there's been a lot of focus on the past few years. We are improving, and that's not universal, even in our region here. 98% graduation rate, which is, again, outstanding. Do we have some challenges? Of course we do. One of them is enrollment. That's, the candidate said earlier, that's more than just an issue facing our district, it's a statewide issue. But I would note, we are right in the middle of what we were projected at 9 years ago, when they did all the studies with the new facilities and the reconfiguration of our buildings. We have 3,900 kids, well, a few more than that right now. We were projected at between 3,800 and 4,000 9 years ago. So we are right in the range. Of course, we need to build our enrollment numbers, though. That's something every community needs to do. And our community is on the right track. We've got city leaders who are out supporting businesses to move, large operations here that will bring a lot of population, and that's what we need. We need a stronger population base. We need our population to grow, and I think by fostering a strong school district, we will attract those people. Thank you again, and have a good evening.
I'd just like to close. I do a lot of, on the private sector, serve on a lot of boards, and that's where I've made a lot of experience, learn how to learn, take different points of view, like all these guys say. I think board function is a huge thing. Whatever we do and like our apprenticeship stuff that I work with, we make sure that the board functions properly. In order to have that, you need to communicate well with each other, see different points of view. argue, you're gonna argue, have disagreements, at least for the community. Go out there, get the right steps in. I love this community. I look at it and I don't like when it's in the newspaper about negative stuff, about arguing about issues and stuff like that. I think that should be handled in-house and try to come to agreements and get rid of the negativity, move forward with our kids, with our staff, with our communities. And I would love to take the experience I have on the boards that I'm on to try to help get functionality back. I can work with any of these guys at this table. I can work with any of the current board members that are working today. I guess that's just where I want to leave it. This community is a good community. Like I said earlier, I want to get that good reputation back, get positivity back in the community instead of negativity, and move forward and grow great kids, great community. Move forward like that. And like I said, I appreciate your vote. I'll work my butt off if I get on there to help in any way I can. And like I say, appreciate all the communities that are part of this. And I often state St. Stephen, St. Wendell, Brockway, Lasac Township, keep them in the loop because I think they get out of the communication loop a lot. And I think that would help us grow together and create a good school district again. Thank everyone here tonight. Thank you for your time. See what happens in November, I guess. Thank you.